ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 7, Further Inquiries by Vidura. So here we are in the second section of this particular chapter, where there is discussion. Maitreya is dispelling all the misconception about Jiva and Ishvara and is finally recommending devotional service. So we are at text 12. So very beautiful analogies, very beautiful purport Srila Prabhupada writes. And text 12, how to remove this material self-identification. Very important verse, we'll recite this. Savai nivritti dharmena
Savai nivrutti
Savai nivrutti
dharmena
dharmena
Vasudevanukampaya
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 Bhagavad Bhakti Yogena
Bhagavad
Bhagavad
Bhakti
Bhakti
Bhakti-yogena
Yogena
Tirodatte Shanairiha.
Tirodhate
Tirodhate
Shanaiha.
Shanariha.
Translation.
But that misconception of self-identity can be diminished gradually by the mercy of the personality of Godhead Vasudeva through the process of devotional service to the Lord in the mode of detachment. Purport: the curing quality of material existence, which comes from identification with matter or from thinking oneself under the material influence of philosophical speculation, to be God, can be eradicated by devotional service to the Lord by the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. As discussed in the first canto, because the application of devotional service to Lord Vasudeva invites pure knowledge, it quickly detaches one from the material conception of life and thus revives one's normal condition of spiritual existence, even in this life, and frees one from material winds which causes one to quiver. Only knowledge and devotional service can elevate one towards the path of liberation. The development of knowledge for the purpose of knowing everything without rendering devotional service is considered fruitless labor, and one cannot get the desired result by such labor of love. Lord Vasudeva is pleased by devotional service only, and thus his mercy is realized by association with pure devotees of the Lord. Pure devotees of the Lord are transcendental to all material desires, including the desire for the results of fruitive activities and philosophical speculation. If one wants to acquire the mercy of the Lord, he has to associate with the pure devotees. Such association alone can, by degrees, release one from the quivering elements. Hare Krishna.
Savai nivritti dharmena. Now Maitreya Muni is saying Vasudeva Anukampaya. That misconception of the self-identity. Now, this is the misconception of the self-identity is the root cause. And that can be diminished gradually by the mercy of Lord Vasudeva Anukampaya. How? Through the process of devotional service to the Lord and the mode of detachment. Bhagavad Bhakti Yogena. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the steady living entity is quivering because of the quality of the material existence. And because of this material existence, the living entity either thinks himself to be matter, paropi manuti anartham, and when the living entity becomes even mischievous, he may think himself to be God. So these are the misidentifications of the living entity. But when the living entity is engaged in Bhagavad Bhakti Yogena, by the mercy of the Lord Vasudeva Anukampaya, one can actually come out of this misconception of self-identity. Because he's identifying himself with the matter, therefore the pure living entity is undergoing these tribulations of samsara chakra. Srila Prabhupada says, we have already seen that application of devotional service to Lord Vasudeva invites pure knowledge. Vasudeve Bhagavati Janayatti Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayat Ahetukam. So whenever there is application of devotional service, Janayatti, it will invite the pure knowledge, Ashu Vairagyam, and very quickly it will also invite detachment. Again, detachment is not irresponsibility. Detachment means detachment from the enjoying spirit. Right. And this is how Prabhupada says that will revive one's normal condition and free one from the material winds which is causing one to quiver. So this development of knowledge is possible through devotional service. And without devotional service, all the knowledge, if one is engaged in the pursuit of the knowledge without being engaged in devotional service, then there will be no satisfaction. Naishkarmyam api achyuta bhava varjitam na shobhate. If there is no achyuta bhava, the sense of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, naishkarmyam api, even the development of knowledge and naishkarmya ityadi will not actually give the satisfaction to the living entity. So Lord Vasudeva is pleased by devotional service, and his mercy can be realized through the association of the pure devotees. So where is the mercy of the Lord? The mercy of the Lord is through the association of his pure devotees, and by such association, one can be released from the quivering material elements. Text 13. Yadendriyo paramot दृष्टात्मनि परे हरौ विलीयन्ते तदा क्लेशा संसुप्तस्यैव कृष्णशः. Translation.
When the senses are satisfied in the seer supersoul, the personality of Godhead, and merge in him, all miseries are completely vanquished as after a sound sleep. Purport: the quivering of the living entity as described above is due to the senses. Since the entire material existence is meant for sense gratification, the senses are the medium of material activities and they cause the quivering of the steady soul. Therefore, these senses are to be detached from all such material activities. According to the impersonalist, the senses are stopped from work by merging the soul in the supersoul Brahman. The devotees, however, do not stop the material senses from acting, but they engage the transcendental senses in the service of the transcendence, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In either case, the activities of the senses in the material field are to be stopped by cultivation of knowledge, and if possible, they can be engaged in the service of the Lord. The senses are transcendental in nature, but their activities become polluted when contaminated by matter. We have to treat the senses to cure them of the material disease, not stop them from acting, as suggested by the impersonalists. In Bhagavad Gita 2.59, it is said that one ceases all material activities only when satisfied by contact with a better engagement. Consciousness is active by nature and cannot be stopped from working. Artificially stopping a mischievous child is not the real remedy. The child must be given some other engagement so that he will automatically stop causing mischief. In the same way, the mischievous activities of the senses can be stopped only by better engagement in relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful form of the Lord, the tongue engaged in tasting prasada or remnants of foodstuff offered to the Lord, the ears are engaged in hearing his glories, the hands engaged in cleaning the temple of the Lord, the legs engaged in visiting his temples, or when all the senses are engaged in transcendental variegatedness, then only can the transcendental senses become satiated and eternally free from material engagement. The Lord, as a supersoul residing in everyone's heart and as a supreme personality of Godhead in the transcendental world, far beyond the material creation, is the seer of all our activities. Our activities must be so transcendently saturated that the Lord will be kind enough to look upon us favorably and engage us in His transcendental service. Then only can the senses be satisfied completely and be no longer troubled by material attraction. Hare Krishna.
So now Maitreya Muni says, when the senses are satisfied in the seer supersoul and thus engaged, all miseries can be completely vanquished just after a sound sleep. Now, after a sound sleep, we feel very enlivened. It's relieving of the misery. And this is a very relatable example that Maitreya Muni is giving here. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the quivering of the living entity is due to the senses. Right, the living entity is quivering because of the senses. Why? Because the living entity wanted to experience material existence for sense gratification, and the medium to experience the material existence is through the senses. And therefore, senses are the cause of quivering of the steady soul. So there is misidentification on the ahankara level, and on the gross level, there is senses. Now, misidentification is slowly purified by engage Bhagavad Bhakti Yogena, by engagement in devotional service. And at the same time, the engagement of the senses, they also have to be purified by engaging them in devotional service to the Supreme Lord. When it comes to impersonalists, they say you don't have to engage the senses, just cut off the senses. Just Srila Prabhupada used to give example, just like somebody has a cataract and the eye is extremely paining. So the impersonalist idea is that, oh, there is a pain in the eye, plug the eye, remove the eye. Na rahega bas, na bajegi basuri. When there are no senses, there is no sense gratification, there is no quivering. But that is not the remedy. The remedy is not to remove the eye. The remedy is to treat the eye and use the eye. Not to become blind, but one can, see the entire world and universe by using one's eyes. And therefore, a devotee of the Lord, he engages the senses instead of trying to negate the senses. So he will stop the activities of the senses on the material platform, and the senses will be engaged on the better spiritual engagement. Bhagavad Gita says this, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinaha rasovarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. When one is engaged in higher tasteful activities, slowly the lower activities will go away from one's life. Right? Srila Prabhupada says here, the consciousness is by nature very active. Previously, we have seen that even when somebody is sleeping, consciousness is still active, and when we'll experience that in the form of dream, etc. So artificially stopping the consciousness is not the idea. It is just like one is artificially stopping a mischievous child. Some child is mischievous. Okay. So you try to just, make the child sit with the folded hand and he's sitting. How long the child will sit? About 2-3 minutes the child will sit. The point is not that the child has to be stopped. The point is the child should be better engaged. Similarly, Prabhupada says, mischievous activities of the senses can be stopped only when they are better engaged. Otherwise, senses do not like vacuum. They will go back to their original engagements. Right? And then how to engage the senses? And that is the science of bhakti. And that's why Srila Prabhupada always translated bhakti as devotional service. Engaging our senses in the service of the Supreme Lord. Eyes in seeing the form of the Lord. Tongue in tasting prasadam. Savai mana Krishna padaravindayor. Vacham sivai kuntha gunanu varanane. Karau harer mandira marjanadishu. Hands in engaged in service of the Lord. Shrutim chakara achyuta satkathode. One's sense of hearing, one can hear so many wonderful lectures are available, right? So when senses are engaged like this, then what happens? They will derive transcendental happiness and they will become satisfied and thus free from the material engagement. The Lord is situated as a super soul, is residing in everyone's heart, and when he sees our activities are transcendently saturated, he becomes very kind upon us and engages us in his devotional service. And when engaged in devotional service, then there is no longer trouble of material attraction. Text 14. It is now the glory of engagement in devotional service. Beautiful verse. We'll recite this. अशेष संक्लेश शमं विधत्ते
अशेष संक्लेश शमं विदत्ते
गुणानुवाद श्रवणं मुरारे
गुणानुवाद श्रवणं मुरारेः
किं वा पुनस्तच्चरणारविन्द
किं वा
पुनश्चरणारविन्द
परागसेवारतिरात्मलब्ध्वा
परागसेवारतिरात्मलब्ध्वा.
Translation.
Simply by chanting and hearing of the transcendental name, form, etc. of the personality of Godhead, Śrī Kṛṣṇa, one can achieve the cessation of unlimited miserable conditions. Therefore, what to speak of those who have attained attraction for serving the flavor of the dust of the Lord's lotus feet? Purport. Two different methods of controlling the material senses are recommended in Vedic scriptural wisdom. One of them is the process of jnana, or the path of philosophical understanding of the Supreme Brahma, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The other is that direct engagement in the transcendental loving devotional service of the Lord. Of these two most popular methods, the path of devotional service is recommended here as the best because one on the path of devotional service does not have to wait for the attainment of the fruitive results of pious activities or for the results of knowledge. The two stages of executing devotional service are first, the stage of practicing devotional service with our present senses under the regulation of the recognized scriptures, and second, attaining sincere attachment for serving the particles of the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. The first stage is called sadhana bhakti or devotional service for neophyte, which is rendered under the direction of pure devotee. And the second stage is called raga bhakti, in which the mature devotee automatically takes to the various services of the Lord out of sincere attachment. The great sage Maitreya now gives the final answer to all the questions of Vidura. Devotional service to the Lord is the ultimate means to mitigate all the miserable conditions of material existence. The path of knowledge or that of mystic gymnastics may be adopted as a means for the purpose, but unless mixed with bhakti or devotional service, they are unable to award the desired result. By practicing sadhana bhakti, one may gradually rise to the point of raga bhakti. And by performing raga bhakti in loving transcendental service, one can even control the supreme powerful Lord.
Now here Maitreya Muni says, Ashesha samklesha shamam vidatte. Simply by chanting and hearing of the transcendental name and form, one can achieve the cessation of the unlimited miserable condition. This is simply by hearing about the Lord, and then what to speak of those who are directly engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Once a devotee, always a devotee. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, there are two different methods of controlling senses. One is the path of philosophical understanding, and second is direct engagement of devotional service. And out of these two most popular methods, Srimad Bhagavatam and Maitreya Muni here in discussion to Vidura, he is directly recommending the practical devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Now, this devotional service can be rendered in two stages. The first stage is called as a Vaidhi or Sadhana Bhakti. And when that is, one will perform the devotional service under the strict guidance and regulations. And then later, the second is called as Raganuga Bhakti, where a devotee becomes mature and automatically takes to the various services out of the natural attraction towards those services. So many questions by Vidura But here is the one final answer by Maitreya Muni, where he says that performance of direct devotional service, Bhagavad Bhakti Yogena, one can attain these things. There is method of jnana, there is method of yoga. Prabhupada says, mystic gymnastics, but they are just the means and not the end of attaining the success. Unless they are mixed with devotional service, they are concluded with devotional service, jnana and yoga, they also fall short of giving the direct conclusion or the direct result. And Prabhupada says here, therefore, a devotee should begin sadhana bhakti and gradually raise to the point of raga bhakti, and thus one can not only satisfy the Supreme Lord, ajita jitopi, one can even control the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is all powerful. So this is the conclusion of Vidura. Vidura is being recommended of devotional service. Now we continue with the third section of this chapter, text 15 to 20, where Vidura shares his heartfelt realization with Maitreya. Text 15. Vidura uvacha sanchhinna samshayo mayyam tava suktasina vibho ubhayatrapi bhagavan mano me sampradhavati. Translation.
Vidura said, O powerful sage, my lord, all my doubts about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities have now been removed by your convincing words. My mind is now perfectly entering into them. Purport: the science of Krishna, or the science of God and the living entities, is so subtle that even a personality like Vidura has to consult persons like the sage Maitreya. Doubts about the eternal relationship with the Lord and the living entity are created by mental speculators in different ways, but the conclusive fact is that the relationship of God and the living entity is one of the predominator and the predominated. The Lord is the eternal predominator, and the living entities are eternally predominated. Real knowledge of this relationship entails reviving the lost consciousness to this standard, and the process for such revival is devotional service to the Lord. By clearly understanding from authorities like the sage Maitreya, one can become situated in real knowledge, and the disturbed mind can thus be fixed on the progressive path. Hare Krishna.
Vidura said, O Bhagavan, O my Lord, all my doubts are cleared about the Ishvara and Jiva by your convincing words, and now my mind is perfectly entering into them, resolving to perform devotional service. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, the science of Krishna and the science of the living entity is very subtle. So much so that even a personality like Vidura is an extremely accomplished personality. Before all this, he has written Vidur Niti, and which is like one of the benchmark books in, the Parashtra Sambandh, external affairs, Ministry of External Affairs. They use this Vidura Niti. And even such a great personality like Vidura, he also need to consult a spiritual master like Maitreya. So Srila Prabhupada says, therefore, there is need to approach the authority, spiritual master, like sage Maitreya, who will impart the real knowledge. And what is the real knowledge? The real knowledge is there is a relationship between Ishvara and Jiva. Ishvara is eternally predominator and Jiva is eternally predominated. The Purusha and Prakriti, and their interaction, the exchange between them is called as Bhagavad Bhakti. And this knowledge has to be received from the spiritual master like Maitreya, although one may be very qualified like Vidura. Text 16. Sadve tat vyavritan vidvan natma maya mayan harehe abhatyapartham nirmulam vishwamulam na yadvahi. Translation.
O learned sage, your explanations are very good, as they should be. Disturbances to the conditioned soul have no other basis than the movement of the external energy of the Lord. Purport: A living entity's unlawful desire to become one with the Lord in every respect is the root cause of the entire material manifestation, for otherwise the Lord has no need to create such a manifestation even for his pastimes. The conditioned soul, under the spell of the external energy of the Lord, falsely suffers many unfortunate incidents in the material life. The Lord is the predominator of the external energy Maya, whereas the living entity is predominated by the same Maya under the material condition. The false attempt of the living entity to occupy the predominating post of the Lord is the cause of his material bondage, and the conditioned soul's attempt to become one with the Lord is the last snare of Maya.
O Vidwan, O Maitreya, Vidura says here, your explanations are very good, as they should be, because you are a great devotee, you are a Vidwan, and therefore he says, as they should be. Disturbances of the conditioned souls have no other basis than the movement of the material energy, that is Maya. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes that the living entity's unlawful desire to become one with the Lord is the root cause of the material manifestation. Otherwise, so what it means is, when a regulated citizen wants to enjoy in an unregulated way, then there is need of a jail. Jail is not erected by the government, that government is very pleased to have a jail. No, the jail is the necessity arrangement for unlawful citizens. Similarly, the material world is created because of the unlawful desires of the living entity, and thus, otherwise, Prabhupada says the Lord has no need of such manifestation. The Lord is predominator of Maya, and as the same Maya predominates living entity, and thus the living entity is quivering under the material qualities. And the last quivering of this material quality, Prabhupada says, the last snare of Maya is to think oneself to be God. This is the last snare of Maya. Text 17. Yascha मूढतमो loke, yascha buddhe param gatah, ताबुभौ सुखमेधेते क्लिश्यन्ते अत्यन्त्रितो जनः. Translation.
For the
Both
lowest of fools and he who is transcendent to all intelligence enjoy happiness, whereas persons between them suffer the material pangs. The purport: the lowest of fools do not understand material miseries. They pass their lives merrily and do not inquire into the miseries of life. Such persons are almost on the level of the animals, who, although in the eyes of superiors, are always miserable in life, are unaware of material distresses. A hog's life is degraded in its standard of happiness, which entails living in a filthy place, engaging in sex enjoyment at every opportune moment, and laboring hard in a struggle for existence. But this is unknown to the hog. Similarly, human beings who are unaware of the miseries of material existence and are happy in sex life and hard labor are the lowest of fools. Yet, because they have no sense of miseries, they supposedly enjoy so-called happiness. The other class of men, those who are liberated and are situated in the transcendental position above intelligence, are really happy and are called Paramahansas. But persons who are neither like hogs and dogs, nor on the level of the Paramahansas feel the material pangs, and for them inquiry about the supreme truth is necessary. The Vedanta Sutra states, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Now one should inquire about Brahman. This inquiry is necessary for those who are between the Paramahansas and the fools who have forgotten the question of self-realization in the midst of life in sense gratification.
Vidura says, Yascha mūఢtamo loke. There are two personalities happy in this world. One is a grossly foolish person or the Paramahamsa. And in between, one has to inquire about all these things and thus realize the purpose of one's life. Just like in exam, when exams are going on, two people are very happy. One person who is guaranteed to fail, he's extremely happy. He will be just moving around the hostel, thinking, inquiring about everyone. And the second one, who is a topper, who has done maybe the 6th and 7th revision of the entire syllabus, he's also very happy. He's just moving around and asking, ye kiya kya, wo kiya kya, like that. But in between people, the janta in between, they will be suffering and having the tension of the exam. So similarly, Prabhupada says here, Vidura says that the persons between them suffer the material pangs. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, the lowest of the fools who are devoid of any understanding of the importance of human life, they are simply engaged in the life of bhoga ishwarya prasaktanam, almost on the level of animals, and they are unaware of the material distress, janma mrityu jara vyati. They are just fully engrossed in the material life. These people, they do not understand, they suffer the material pangs but do not understand the material pangs. And the other people who are on the higher level, who are transcendentally situated, they are liberated, they are the Paramhamsa, they also do not feel the pangs of the material nature. Only people in between of these two, Mudhatama and Paramahamsa, Parabuddhe, they suffer, and therefore, which is like the vast majority of the people, and therefore for them, they should inquire about the absolute truth, athato brahma jigyasa, and thus understand the perfection of the human life. So we'll conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Prabhupada.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.